I'm Danielle Kessner, and this is Paved with Good Intentions, making Mom proud since 1984. Do you think people who live in Rome use the expression "when in Rome"? Welcome to another episode of Paved with Good Intentions, the show that asks the difficult questions you didn't even think you cared about. This podcast is produced sponsor-free, so thank you for supporting independent artists. Today we'll be talking about big popcorn movies, the kind that have lots of laughs, explosions, and best of all, they're an excuse to kill time during the summer. But first, here's your piece of random trivia. In honor of New Horizons reaching Pluto this past week, here's a couple of fun facts. Did you know the planet was named by an 11-year-old girl? Kids say the darndest things, like naming a planet after the Roman god of the underworld. Sadly, Pluto is no longer considered a planet, although that is up for debate. Though it will always be a planet in my heart, that's for sure. Because of its size, which is smaller than Earth's moon, it's like looking at a walnut from 30 miles away. Someone really wants that walnut. If you haven't seen the pics, you definitely should. They are fantastic. And now on to our episode, Attack of the Summer Blockbusters. In case you've been living under a rock, or you don't obsess about movies like I do, you might have missed Jurassic World completely decimating the box office and becoming one of the biggest hits of all time. It came out last month and since then has raked in well over $1 billion worldwide, including well over $500 million in the United States alone. When summer rolls around, you can always count on the big dollar movies showing up. You'll get your comic book movies, you'll get your Avengers, your Dark Knights, Pirates of the Caribbean, Harry Potter, Transformers, Pacific Rim, even big comedies like The Hangover. These are movies that are usually part of a franchise, and these franchises are dominating the landscape and have been doing so for quite some time. Unfortunately, because we have so many comic book movies or franchise-type movies like Harry Potter, science fiction films, sequels, just big, loud movies, there aren't nearly as many original properties that are making it into the marketplace nowadays, at least not on the same scale that you're going to get, say, Transformers. In fact, this past year, just in the last few months, Inside Out, Pixar's latest movie, became the highest grossing original property to be released ever, basically. So when I say original property, I mean not a sequel, not a remake, not the first part of a franchise, although it very well could become part of a franchise. But for right now, Inside Out is still the highest grossing original property. While something like that succeeded, you're going to have other original properties that don't quite go so far as, say, Inception did. Movies like Tomorrowland or Pacific Rim are a couple movies that didn't do so well when they first arrived on the scene. Pacific Rim has become kind of a cult favorite, at least in the US. Worldwide, it did much better. But Tomorrowland, I don't necessarily see doing too well, even though it was a fairly original property, based on a ride at Disney World. But here or there. And as these big movies come out, there's also the inevitable critic scores that aren't always going to be so hot. Jurassic World, which is one of the top 3 grossing movies ever now, has a score just about 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, and whether or not you put a lot of stock into what they say on Rotten Tomatoes, the fact is it means that 70% of the reviews that they saw at least had something positive to say about it. That being said, most of their criticisms of the movie are spot on, in that it's not particularly well written, it's very cliche, there's a lot of very silly moments and plot points that don't seem to go anywhere. But in the end, if you want to go see dinosaurs eat people, it delivers. Last weekend, as of today, only 2 of the top 10 box office movies of the week were over 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. So most of them were less than 70%, and some way less than 70%, meaning that they're not exactly critical masterpieces. And actually, these scores do have an effect on whether or not the movie is going to be big or popular. Tomorrowland is a good example of that because even though it was directed by Brad Bird, who has had a pretty good string of movies, including The Incredibles and Ratatouille, even though he directed it, it did not get the hype that it probably could have. And once the critic reviews started rolling in and it sat pretty much right at 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, that pretty much sealed its fate. And as such, it's going to go down as one of the biggest flops in Disney movie history. But then again, they also had the Avengers this year, which did pretty well for itself. And Ant-Man, not quite as well, but it's probably going to get still going to do very well with word of mouth. I saw it this weekend. It's very funny. And there's always exceptions. So even though movies that are coming out in the summer might not have the highest reviews, these are not going to be Oscar-nominated movies. It does happen, but way back in the past. More often than not, the summer movies are there for the entertainment value. But there are exceptions, and some of them do get fairly high critical reviews. Just this year, Mad Max Fury Road, which is probably the funnest movie I've seen this year, came out to extremely good reviews, mind-bogglingly good reviews actually, but there's a reason for it because it is actually a really well done film. And then you get something like last year's Guardians of the Galaxy, which even though it's none of these are original properties, these are still part of franchises, but they do something that's just enough to get people's attention and to get people to want to go see it. And the critics help that along by giving them very good reviews, and rightfully so. I'm not saying the critics are wrong, but it is surprising. And the reason that it's important, the summer box office is important, is because a big percentage of the yearly box office comes from the summer. This is when most of the money is made for the year, is during the summer. And there's a few obvious reasons for that, because people have time. It's the summer. Kids are out of school. They're not at school, so where are they going to go? As long as you don't want them loitering behind a 7-Eleven, sending them to the movies is not a bad idea. And the movies themselves usually come with a lot of hype. There's a lot of popcorn, a lot of action, a lot of comedy. People have a lot of free time, and it's a good way to get out of the heat, especially if you live in a place like Colorado where it gets pretty hot. And what's interesting is that a lot of the movies that come out during the summer are often maligned for their lack of art, at least visibly in the theaters. There's still going to be smaller movies, independent films that do come out during the summer, but most of the movies are going to be the ones that people say are the mindless action movies, the raunchy comedies, the really silly family films like Minions. Those are the ones that are coming out during the summer because they're attracting the people who have the most time on their hands, which is basically the youth of America. I'm sure around the world there's also youth too. So it's really important to put out those movies that are going to draw those audiences in the summer when they have time to go see these movies. So that's why we get this wealth of action movies, this wealth of explosions, all of these things that basically are meant to draw in the younger audiences. But as such, they often get criticized as being mindless entertainment. But despite that labeling, despite people saying that these are mindless movies, I actually do see a lot of them. I don't see as many as I used to, but I still do see quite a few of them. I mean, I've seen Ant-Man, I've seen Avengers, Jurassic World, Inside Out. Didn't see Terminator, that just looked bad. But I still do see a lot of these movies, even though going into it I know that it might not necessarily be a mind-blowing movie or something that is going to stick with me for a long time. I mean, I know they're not going to be meaningful, at least in the way of, some of these other movies that come out. And I don't want to necessarily say they're not Oscar worthy, because that is a debate in itself. But they're just movies that are meant to be entertaining. They're meant to be fun. They're meant to draw you in and show you a good time for 2 hours. But I really do like having fun like that. And I'm actually one of the more interesting ones sometimes because even though I do have high standards, like of the best movies I've seen over the past 10 years, I probably have not given a single one of them a perfect rating. Like if I were to use IMDb's 10-star scale, I don't think I've given a single movie 10 stars since 2007, which would be There Will Be Blood, which is not to say that there haven't been any good movies since then. There have been amazing movies since then, like 12 Years a Slave, Life of Pi, Gravity, The King's Speech. There have been number of fantastic movies to come out over the years, but apparently I have exceedingly high standards. But given my high standards, that doesn't mean there aren't movies that I watch just to turn my brain off. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen Michael Bay's The Rock because it's just an enjoyable movie. You don't have to think about it. You can just watch it, enjoy it, and turn your brain off. And I like to do that too. Sometimes I need to, especially in the summer. And a lot of times that's because it's also hard to watch those great movies. Like Requiem for a Dream might be one of the greatest movies ever made, but that doesn't mean it's something I want to watch on a Friday night during the summer. That's a tough movie to watch. And these movies really do exist to satisfy that colorful, that funny, that explosive need that sometimes we need, especially when the world it's around us is there's so much negativity in it. It's good to have that distraction. And there's nothing wrong with that because pop culture is meant to have a broad appeal. And a lot of times that happens without any kind of controversy. It's just something that's created to cater to a mass audience. There's nothing wrong with that. And that doesn't diminish what it is as an art form. It just means that instead of focusing on something that might have more relevant issues that it's tackling, it might be something that's just a simple hero's journey. And we like that. Who doesn't like hearing the story about the hero's journey? It's pretty much one of the oldest paradigms we have in storytelling. It's easier to root for the heroes. It's easier to listen to rhythmic music than something that is extremely complex and trying to draw people in with complex rhythms. Comics are a lot more popular than, high art form. It's just because there's more fun. It's something that draws more people into it. That doesn't say that it's better. Just because more people like it doesn't mean it's better. It just means that it's something that can appeal to a broader audience. And of course, there's always going to be exceptions. There's going to be low budget movies that are highly successful. There's going to be movies that have high critical acclaim, like Mad Max. And when you look at the box office records and you look at like the IMDb top 200, you see that pop culture and popularity, those aren't necessarily determining what is the best, but it's also a good indicator of what is popular. So it's important to look at the box office and see, okay, Jurassic World just made $500 million. People must enjoy it. If there's that many people going to see it and some people are seeing it multiple times, it has to have something to offer that keeps bringing people back. Whether it's nostalgia, whether it's just the mindless entertainment, whether it's the visual effects, whether it's seeing two dinosaurs battle royale at the end of it. It's not really a spoiler, but let's just face it. There's an awesome dino battle. But it gets into the larger debate. When we're talking about the box office, we're talking about the summer. It's all about the entertainment, the money, the big showy movies, the visual effects fests, the ones that appeal to a broader audience. But it begs the larger question, which is that debate between art and entertainment. And the question is, can these popcorn movies still be considered art? Now, there's obviously two sides to this argument. There's going to be yes or no. And if you say no, it's probably going to be because you're saying that these movies don't have that significant impact that I was talking about. Transformers versus 12 Years a Slave, one of them obviously has a much greater impact on society and social justice issues. It discusses something far more important, 12 Years a Slave does, than Transformers does. There's really not a lot of arguing there. And these movies are just about being raunchy, or they're just being funny, or there's just supposed to be a lot of explosions, or there's supposed to be teenage sex appeal type of things, you know? So there's just this criticism that these movies have no substance, I guess would be the best way to say it. But on the flip side, if you're saying yes, that these popcorn movies can still be art, it's because art is supposed to evoke emotion. It might not necessarily be focused on a social justice issue, but if it evokes an emotion, then isn't that art? And things like satisfaction, laughter, joy, awe, fear, all those are all emotions. They're not necessarily complex emotions, because laughing at a fart joke is not exactly a complex emotion, but it's something that evokes it. It makes you feel good, you feel happy about it. And that's what art can do. Art can evoke those emotions in people, and these movies do precisely that. And then above all, art is just too subjective. There's so many rules in certain styles, but it's not that those are universal to all art form. In fact, I remember talking to an art teacher at one point. She said that Bob Ross was not art. And you can make that argument, but at the same time, I look at a Bob Ross painting and I say, that's beautiful stuff. So for me, I think it's art. For someone else, they might not say so. And we really shouldn't malign these movies, because a lot of them are using technology that we've been developing over the past 20, 30 years. And some of it looks amazing. Jurassic World looks amazing. And we have this technology, so why wouldn't we use it? Sure, you can make a movie that has a lot more dialogue and human emotion, but we have this technology to make these fantastic worlds. Why don't we use it? It worked for Lord of the Rings, and look how those movies turned out. But that doesn't mean that everything is good, and it doesn't mean that everything that comes out is art. But that doesn't mean that because it might not fit into this definition of high art, that it isn't in fact art. And I'm not trying to say that Jurassic World is the greatest movie. It's far from it. It's entertaining, and that's all I asked it to do. I just wanted to go into it and be entertained. But it's far from the best movie I've seen in a while. But it is a good distraction. And especially with all the negativity in the world, everything that's going wrong, and all the bad news you read, it's good to have a distraction that at least you can walk away with a smile and say, that was fun, that was awesome, I laughed, I had a good time. And it's a distraction. And distractions exist for a reason, because we want to have fun. We want to laugh, we want to cry, we want to cheer. And when we walk away, we want to feel like it was money well spent. Doesn't always happen, but that's what we want. When you go to see a movie like Jurassic World, you're not walking away thinking, that really made me think about the world. You want to walk away feeling, yeah, that was worth the $12 I just dropped on it. And it doesn't have to endure forever. But as long as it satisfies in that moment, that's what matters. That's the question. I mean, that's what we're looking for, is that satisfaction at that time when we see it. That distraction, that enjoyment, that entertainment. So are you not entertained? Thanks for watching again. Check out more Paved with Good Intentions right here on YouTube. And you can also check out the audio feed on iTunes and Stitcher. And the audio feed will have some bonus content, and this week I highly recommend it. You can also check out my other videos and anything else I've ever favorited, because you have oodles of time to kill. It is summer after all. And be sure to check out my other podcast, Translation, which you can find at the link below, as well as on iTunes and Stitcher. And if you have any questions you'd like me to ponder on the show, send me an email at translationpodcast@gmail.com. I do want to hear from you, so send me your thoughts, your questions, your favorite Dr. Seuss titles. If you want me to read those on the show, I certainly can. Once again, this podcast is produced sponsor-free, so thank you for supporting independent artists. See you on the other side.